In this video, I'm going to show you how to manipulate this equation to find the equation for the other variables. This is the equation as it appears on your formula sheet for POE, and they only give you this version of it. So I found that students often get confused and can't find the equation they need whenever they need to use it on the exam because they're not used to seeing it in this form. So let's say we want to solve for the initial velocity. I need to know what's the initial velocity. I've been given x and I've been given the theta. I need to know initial velocity. So this is how we would do the algebra to get the equation to make it say v sub I equals. First thing I want to do is undo dividing by negative g. So I'm going to multiply both sides by negative g. Then I need to get the initial velocity by itself, so I need to undo multiplying by the sine of 2 theta. So I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 2 theta. And now I have the initial velocity squared equals negative g of x divided by the sine of 2 theta. Now in order to get the initial velocity by itself, I need to unsquare it. So the inverse of squaring something is the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And that's how I get my initial velocity equal to the square root negative g times x divided by the sine of 2 theta. That's the formula that you're more likely going to be familiar with, even though it doesn't show that particular formula on your formula sheet. Now let's say that you wanted to have it solved for theta instead. Oops, pen's not working. X equals initial velocity squared, sine of 2 theta. So this time I'm going to solve for theta and get the angle all by itself. Actually, we'll solve for 2 theta because that's what you're going to recognize from the PowerPoint slide. So let's work to get 2 theta all by itself. So again, in order to undo dividing by negative g, I need to multiply both sides by negative g. And then in order to get the 2 theta by itself, the first thing I need to do is remove the initial velocity. So instead of multiplying by the initial velocity squared, to undo it, the inverse operation is divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by the initial velocity squared. And then this is where it gets a little tricky. Hopefully you remember from your geometry class that the inverse of sine is the sine inverse function. So I'm going to take the sine inverse of both sides. And sine inverse and sine undo each other. So then that's how I get 2 theta equals sine inverse of negative g times x all over initial velocity squared. That's a G right there. I'm having troubles with something underneath my paper, making it a mess. So this is the formula that you'll find on the PowerPoint slide. This is what it looks like. And that's how they got it from the original equation of x equals initial velocity squared sine of 2 theta divided by negative g. Keep in mind on this one that when you solve this, you get twice the angle, and if you want to get the answer, your final answer, then you're going to have to divide both sides by 2 to get just one angle instead of 2 angles.